Development in the Bitcoin space often happens in leaps and bounds, and the people who are responsible for innovations that come out in the future are not necessarily the same people who have been responsible for those innovations in the past. Today I'm joined by Daniel Larimer. Daniel and I have been trying to get together for the last couple of months now to talk about some of the projects and ideas that he's been working on, because really, despite the fact that you've probably never heard his name before, is at the forefront of a lot of what's going on in the space and has a very exciting project that I'm really looking forward to getting into with you today. Daniel, before we get into that, can you tell me a little bit about how you came to cryptocurrencies and sort of what your experience has been?
Yes, some background about myself. I'm a software engineer who started studying economics and libertarian philosophy several years ago. And I discovered Bitcoin early on when it was still possible to mine with your CPU. I knew it was going to be amazing, and I bought $20 worth of Bitcoins. Then I got busy with life and wasn't paying attention. And next thing I knew, they were worth $30. And I had several $1,000s, and I thought this was really amazing. But I still didn't have time to really innovate. I didn't have any ideas at the time. But this spring, when Bitcoin went to the moon to $275, I decided to look into it again. And I noticed that one of the biggest problems we had was how to create a decentralized exchange. That got me thinking and started posting on the forum.
So decentralized exchanges are something of a holy grail within the Bitcoin community, because the primary pain point that most people can easily identify is, in fact, that moment of exchange from a government currency into a cryptocurrency or the other way around. The difference between a decentralized exchange and a normal exchange, what is that, Daniel?
It has to do with trust and central points of failure. A decentralized exchange has no one who's holding your money for you. It allows you to have price discovery without a central server. It works best if you have people that can meet up in person. So there are no big organizations or banks or accounts that can be seized. And if you can achieve that, you can add a lot of value to the entire cryptocurrency realm. But more important than that is how users interact with one another. You need a way to identify people and to communicate, because that's what an exchange is. It brings people together to place bids and asks and discover prices. There's a really multi-sided problem here to solve a decentralized exchange, and we've come up with some really innovative solutions.
So a decentralized exchange, in much the same way that Bitcoin takes the idea of money and takes it out of the hands of a few and puts it into the, hands of many, and so many, in fact, that most people can use it as a system, but nobody can modify the system. This is pretty much the same here, is that the primary pain point when it comes to exchanges is that there's one central entity, and that central entity can be regulated and can be pressured, basically. It's a choke point to a certain extent. And so because of that, this otherwise decentralized currency is easier to control because it has these few points that everything must pass through on its journey from government currency into cryptocurrency. Correct.
Now, the decentralized exchange is just the start. It was the beginning of a journey that has yielded much more than I could have imagined at the onset. In the process of coming up with the ideas of BitShares, which you may have heard about in the Bitcoin Talk forums, we've recognized the need to distribute communication and identity and to make cryptocurrencies easier to use. I'm working to create a company, Invictus Innovations, and what we're doing is trying to amplify cryptocurrencies. We want them to be so easy to use that people never have to see a Bitcoin address again.
You said Applify, not amplify, right?
Yes, Applify. We want to do to Bitcoin what Apple did to computing.
Okay, I can definitely see the need for that. And that certainly is something that people have been talking about. Again, this is another holy grail, is usability for Bitcoin. So how does one go about Applifying the experience?
The first thing is to understand the user experience. I'm a longtime Mac user, so I have high expectations for usability of systems. You want it to be as easy to use as email. You have minimal configuration and no need to trust. So we looked at this, and I wanted to create a system that would allow effectively Namecoin, except we can support 1 billion users with unique names attached to their public keys. And with this, you can combine it with a system like BitMessage, and you have decentralized email that's zero configuration and allows you to connect with your friends and family.
So you're talking about combining Bitcoin with BitMessage as far as functionality is concerned, And then where does Namecoin come into this? Let's talk about Namecoin for a second. This is something listeners might not be overly familiar with. Namecoin is a distributed DNS system. You're going to be able to explain this better than I can. I know it has something to do with the .bit domains.
I will explain Namecoin here very, very briefly. Namecoin is a way of using a blockchain to allow people to buy domains. The challenge with Namecoin is that domains people are used to paying for. People aren't used to paying for email accounts. There's a ease of use issue with having to pay for something. If you have to pay for something, people don't do it. So I wanted to create a way of giving a name, a meaningful name, to a public key that didn't involve users having to get out their checkbook, didn't involve having to figure out how to get into the cryptocurrency space and all the things associated with an exchange. The user experience I wanted to create is you download our client, which we're calling Keyhotee, and you run it. You go through a setup wizard and you type in your name that you would like. It tells you whether or not it's already been reserved on the blockchain. If it hasn't, then you're free to reserve it. And you end up mining your name. And you can't transfer it, so there's no economic incentive for squatting. But for a little bit of CPU time, you can have your name registered globally and uniquely in a decentralized database.
You mentioned communications in Bitmessage. So I use Bitmessage, and Bitmessage has addresses that look very, very similar to Bitcoin addresses. They just start with BM dash in front of them. So how exactly is that going to work here? In your system, what is a name going to look like? If I wanted to send you a message or something else, what would I be typing?
I would tell you that my name is Bytemaster, and you type in Bytemaster.
And because you've mined that name, it means that you own that name?
I own that name as long as I renew it once a year.
And renewing it, again, that's not a monetary process. That's you devote your computer to it. So like, how long would it take for me to mine a name?
That's still being evaluated, but I'm targeting about 1 hour CPU time per year per user.
Okay. This is a passive process where, like I set my computer to do it, and then I come back in an hour and it's done?
Yeah, so when you first create your name, your computer will dedicate its full attention to reserving it for you. After you've created your name, you can set a threshold for like 1% of your CPU power that will be dedicated to renewing your name, which will on average keep your name renewed every single year. Now, this actually causes a unique phenomenon. Not only do you get your name registered, but you now have a record of when your account was first created and how much CPU power, because I track how many times you've renewed. As a result, you have resistance against Sybil attacks. Your identity has age and reputation based on effort put into creating it, which means you cannot just dispose of identities anymore.
So you said Sybil attack. I'm not familiar with that. Am I saying the word right?
Yes. This is an attack where in anonymous systems, someone can create as many accounts as they want. So if you are using a traditional news aggregation site like Dig, you could create 1,000 accounts and vote up any article you want. That's known as a Sybil attack because you don't know that these identities are unique. With the system that we've come up with, you can identify how unique a name is by the economic cost of creating the name. And that's tied basically to mining power. What level of difficulty have you achieved for your name?
So this is something that, again, when we talk about mining, generally speaking on the show, we're talking about how hard it's getting to mine. Is this something that over time will get harder to mine, or there will just be less available combinations?
The network is targeted to require a maximum amount of bandwidth of a streaming radio station. As a result, when we get to 1 billion users, it will maximize the bandwidth. And at that point in time, the difficulty will start to rise. Until then, it doesn't actually rise very much.
Okay. So one more question here, and then we can move on to my next question after this last question. So you mentioned that you mine these on a blockchain. Where is this blockchain? And I mean, is this, because we're not talking about the Bitcoin blockchain, are we?
No, this is a very unique blockchain. The reason why we couldn't use something like Namecoin is because it cannot scale to handle 1 billion users with the data size and remain as decentralized as we would like. So we had to get the size of the transaction as small as possible. And in this case, the size of the transaction used to register your name is less than 100 bytes. which is a third the size of some of the smallest Bitcoin transactions.
Mm-hmm.
Furthermore, because you don't have to have extra transactions involved in exchanging or trading, you've reduced a lot of the overhead on the network. So our target was decentralization. We want everyone to be able to use these names, not just for email or communication, but to log into websites to create accounts. So basically a decentralized identity for the entire internet. So to achieve that, it needs to be lightweight enough. And we cannot have a system that grows to hundreds of gigabytes like Bitcoin is going to. And we don't want to burden people with all the extra overhead of a currency if all they want to use is an identity system.
So this is a blockchain specifically devoted just to these usernames, essentially, and that's the only thing that it does.
Correct.
Okay. So I buy the premise. What happens when I have secured my name? What can I do with that?
Once you have secured your name, anyone, anywhere on the internet can reference that database and validate you are who you say you are. It means if you are posting an article on Bitcoin Talk and you'd like to be tipped, you can just put your name down. And as a result, people can just look up your name and they can send you Bitcoin. They can contact you privately, securely, with all the privacy of BitMessage. You can log into websites that support authentication using this database.
So when did Bitcoin come into this? Because I heard us talking about communication and I heard us talking about identity, but I haven't. Where does Bitcoin come into this since it's on a separate blockchain?
Well, the Keyhotee client is, after we get the communication done, we're going to make it into a Bitcoin wallet. Bitcoin uses public keys, and the same public key system that we're using for the ID system that we're creating and for our messaging system. So your identity that you use for signing your messages can also be a Bitcoin address that you can receive money from.
Is that a Bitcoin wallet, or is it specifically just one address, and that address is like a public address that I would have associated? So like if my name is Adam B. Levine on stuff that I do, then I would put that down. And if somebody sent money to Adam B. Levine, then it would be routed to this specific Bitcoin address that I've set up as my primary public or something?
Yeah, it won't be routed there. It just is your address.
Oh, it is?
Yes. Your public key published to Adam can be converted into a Bitcoin address, and people can make donations to it. Using our client, you won't even have to do that process. You will just say, I would like to send Adam 1 Bitcoin, and it will send you a Bitcoin. Now, that's good for public donations, to donation addresses, but it would be a compromise to your privacy if all your transactions were done through a single address. But we have a solution for that as well. The way we accomplish that is you can friend people. Just like Skype, I can send you a message and says that requests that I be your friend. And the Keyhotee client will automatically negotiate a exchange of Bitcoin addresses that are unique for each contact you have without the user having to manually copy or manage their addresses.
So every time I want to make a payment to you, is it automatically negotiating this, or is it when we become friends or when we become connected that it generates one? And so like I would have one address that I would send from and receive to for Adam's relationship with Bytemaster, right?
It's actually much more robust than that. I'm using a hierarchical deterministic wallet, which allows me to give you the information necessary to generate as many unique Bitcoin addresses for me as you need to make payments. So each time you want to make a payment for me, you can just calculate a new address and use a new address each time without having to synchronize with me. And my wallet will be able to generate the private keys, and I'll be able to know that all of these payments are from you. So for one exchange of information, you can now send me payments whenever you like.
That's pretty neat. So we've got a name system, we've got a messaging system, and we've got the name system is also an identity system. You said it can be used on other websites besides ones that you're going to be operating. I could think about this like blockchain.info, except instead of it being a bunch of anonymous names, it could be essentially a directory where if someone wants to look up my name and reference me, then they can do that. They can see all the information associated. I mean, right? This is still kind of public, isn't it?
Yes, it's very public. Your name is actually stored as a hash, so you can't search it for a name, for any name, but you can test a name. Is it there? And you can say it is. So you can't just observe it. You have to check each name you're looking for. But what it really is a database that replaces certificate authorities. You're probably familiar with SSL connections that you use for your online banking, and all the different websites you log into. That's all based on certificate authorities that certify that this public-private key is actually owned by the person who owns this domain name. The problem is there's no certificate authority for people. Well, I take that back. There is, but it's so hard to use, and it's full of backdoors. The government can sign for you. And the certificate authority, you have to trust them not to forge anything on your behalf. So it's a trust-based system. With our ID system, you have replaced certificate authorities with a new blockchain that allows websites to authenticate users, automatically create accounts, and prevent spam accounts from being created by setting thresholds for reputations required to create the account.
So this sounds fairly similar to the project that we've talked with Joe Cascio about, because he was kind of looking at doing something real similar with Bitcoin addresses that have some sort of reputation tied up with them, and then using that Bitcoin address as a identity on a variety of sites. So getting back to the sort of blockchain.info comparison, if I on Let's Talk Bitcoin wanted to one of these names on the blockchain with our website and wanted to have that as a login, then essentially the website Let's Talk Bitcoin, when I'm logging in, would send a request to this database and say, is this person here? Right?
Yes, it would be a challenge response system where you would say, prove you are this person, and you'd give me some random data. I would sign it with my private key, and you'd be able to verify that I am indeed the person who I say I am, and therefore log me into your website. And this would be a two-part system. You have the browser plugin that checks the client and does all the signing on the client side. And then the website itself would have a server-side process that would make sure that the login was authenticated and create your account for you.
Are you telling me that we can have an address that's LTB or Let's Talk Bitcoin or something like that, something that's short and I can actually say on the air, and then people can send me money straight to that without me having to have them come to my website? Because that's a pretty big deal. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, that's really cool. Well, good job on that. So why hasn't somebody else done this yet? Because I've been waiting on this one, I got to tell you.
The challenge in the space right now is everyone is trying to think about how to create a better currency. With the exception of Namecoin, everyone is viewing Bitcoin as a currency. We have adopted a different philosophy that is going to revolutionize the way people design and build products in this space. Instead of a currency, we view Bitcoin, Namecoin, as a distributed autonomous corporation, where the currency is just the shares, the ownership of the corporation, and the corporation provides services to the community. Now, those services can be currency service, a record keeping. They could be a name registration system like Namecoin. There are many things you can do with a distributed autonomous corporation that we have a roadmap of a dozen different ideas of ways to use blockchains in new and innovative ways. The ID system is just the first example, and it's a rather unique blockchain that there's no currency trading. The value of mining is having your name, and everyone is mining and confirming everyone else's name in the process of registering their own name. So it's providing a service to the community without having shares per se. Your shares are your reputation. But there are many other things you can do once you realize that a blockchain is shares of a distributed corporation. And then those shares should earn profits for the shareholders and pay dividends. And with that, we have designed systems like BitShares. You can do prediction markets. You can revolutionize so many different industries if you think about it with this mindset, because no longer are you just creating an altcoin that's trying to compete to be a currency. You're trying to provide a service. And the number of services, whether it's registering domain names or providing arbitration services and escrow services, is unlimited. And it's all about engineering the incentives to allow people to coordinate and cooperate via a blockchain. And the key ingredient to all of this and all blockchains is that you need a way of identifying people and communicating with people that's easy to use. And that's why we've opted to do the communication and the identification system as the first steps on our roadmap toward a Bitcoin wallet that's easy to use And then we're going to go on and make cryptocurrencies easy to use with our BitShares protocol, which will allow the creation of BitUSD or BitGold. And these are cryptocurrencies that have all the properties of Bitcoin with the added benefit that they track the price of gold and silver in a decentralized way with no counterparty risk. And they also pay you dividends. So you can hold BitUSD and earn greater returns than you would in a bank account. And we believe that this is just the tip of the iceberg, or the things that are possible when you start adopting a different mindset.
So how far out is the first version that I can actually use?
We are working as hard as we can, 12, 14 hours a day, to get the communication, the name system out. You'd be able to start seeing screenshots of it, C3, the cryptocurrency conference, with a beta out for your use by Thanksgiving. And after we get the communication out, we're aiming to have full Bitcoin wallet integration by the end of the year.
That sounds like a very ambitious schedule, but I got to say, I'm anxious to see more competition in the wallet space, especially where the focus is on usability rather than some of the other things we've seen featured. Not to say that I don't love the security of Armory Wallet, but usability would be awesome if I could just send coins the same way that one sends an email. So, Daniel, if somebody is interested in your project, wants to learn more about it, or wants to get involved, what's the process for doing that? And are you looking for anything in particular?
Yes, we've got funding, but we don't have people. We are looking to find top quality C++ developers, particularly if you know anything about Qt and GUI development. And if you're interested and have time and availability to work with us, you can contact us through our website at invictus-innovations.com. That will allow us to tell us about yourself and what you can do, and we'd love to have you on board. Our mission as a company is to provide decentralized solutions to centralized problems. We're really a philosophical company, and we want to engineer freedom, find free market solutions to create a more free world. And working here is going to be a very fun experience.
Well, Daniel, I look forward to our next conversation on the topic, and we'll have to talk about digital autonomous corporations next time, because that definitely is a very interesting topic. Daniel, thank you very much for the work that you're doing, and really looking forward to seeing this product.
Yeah, thank you.
EasyDNS is the Swiss Army knife for your domain names, helping meet their customers' individual needs since 1998. EasyDNS has been an outspoken critic of SOPA and CISPA. EasyDNS was an early supporter of Bitcoin, and now they are proud to sponsor this show. Do business with a company that shares your values. Get a 13% discount when you pay with Bitcoin. Go to bitcoin.easydns.com and be sure to use discount code LTB.